welcome as well. We were delighted to see the level of interest. This is an experiment, as so many things are in this moment. I was going to start with a joke about making sure everyone was wearing pants, but I realized that maybe cuts a little too close right now. So we're just happy you're here with us. The idea here is really that we want to find a way to connect with our community while we're all operating and living remotely. And we thought this is certainly a way to get a sense of how our community's college has been adapting and pivoting, as so many have, as we all navigate this very new territory together. So this is our inaugural COVID conversation. And of course, we're going to start at the top with our very own superintendent and president. I will say we were so delighted with our registrations that we may have exceeded our own limits with Zoom. So we're going to apologize in advance if we are unable to let everyone in to this, but as Raisa said, we are going to, okay, so we'll share that. And then we'll just make sure our limit is bigger for next time. So with that as a preamble, I will say that we are very happy to have with us today our superintendent president, Dr. Utpal Goswami. Many of you have had the opportunity to meet him, and I know on this call we have faculty and staff and administrative representatives. We also have community members and donors and foundation members and board members. So it's a really broad cross-section of our community, and we're very happy to have you all with us. So with no further ado, I am very happy to welcome to the big screen our superintendent president, Dr. Utpal Goswami. Welcome, Dr. G.
Thank you, Jeff. Good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for taking the time to show up for a Zoom meeting. Not the same as face-to-face meetings, but I think, we will try our best to, just like our faculty is trying to do their best to communicate with students remotely, I will do my best to remotely communicate with you. As most of all of you know, that I've been here just for 4 months. I can certainly say I didn't sign up for this assignment to turn into this. Nobody did. But I was really proud in the way how the entire college community stepped up to do what we needed to do to continue our instruction. In many ways, we are leading the pack in terms of community colleges. And in another forum, I commented that this is the SBCC that I signed up for, because I knew that internally it had capacity to do amazing things. And what I'd like to do in the next few minutes, share some of the things that we have done in responding to this pandemic that we have among us. So Raisa, if you can start me off, I will. Well, we can move this from the slide to the main one, I would say.
I am trying here. Here we go.
Okay.
Pardon me.
So suffice to say that we are in kind of unprecedented circumstances. We started watching what is happening from the end of January, and our initial phase of planning lasted from January to end of February. And at that point, we weren't sure whether it's going to be a just localized thing in various parts of the country, whether it's going to be statewide, nationwide. So our initial planning was we could not factor in that there's going to be statewide help or statewide initiatives or community-wide initiatives. But thankfully, those things happen. So we are very thankful for everybody coming together. So our initial approach was, how do we keep students safe? How do we keep employees safe? And how do we provide continuous instruction? And essentially boil down to how to salvage a semester. And one of the things in California is that if you have to do things that is different from everybody else, then we cannot offer credit to students only if they complete 80% of the semester. So not knowing whether it's going to be a statewide thing or whether it's going to be localized to a few communities, our initial planning was how do we get students to 80% of the semester in terms of their competencies and work so that we can offer them credit. Thankfully, as we were planning to do that, things changed, and we were able to do things much better. So if you go to the next slide. So as part of our planning in the month of February, what we did was we assessed we knew that things have to go remotely online. So we have a very strict guidelines in terms of what kind of instructor training is required for teaching online at SBCC. So we quickly identified in our planning phase that we will need significant amount of training for all our faculty. We assessed our IT abilities. We had a crisis immediately in our hands because Italy at that point was booming with the virus. And we had a group of students in Italy study abroad. So we had to make plans to bring those students back. And then we had to assess that if we have to close down our campus, if it becomes a kind of a site where significant virus presence is felt that we have to quarantine the campus, how do we move things online? And we immediately found that we could do most of the things online, except we could not pay people because our payroll process is such that we have to have some campus involvement. So we quickly made moves to require employees to go to direct deposit. We also identified that a lot of people cannot be utilized efficiently or in a remote environment, but we wanted to use their time properly. So we identified need for training and professional development modules for our employees. We went to the market looking for cleaning solutions, wipes, gloves, all of those things. And believe it or not, even by the third week of February, we were looking at long lags. Some of the things we ordered at that time, we barely received it in April, and some of them we still haven't received them. We were able to get the touchless disinfectants for the bathrooms, which was very important for our custodial staff, because they were the front lines of disinfecting bathrooms and other facilities. And we started preparing for the webpage to communicate with students and the community, and to make it as far as possible bilingual. So that was part of among the many things we have done in the initial preparation for the pandemic. Going to the next slide. So now we're in March. On March 16th, given that UCSP was already gone online for about a week, I issued a directive to move our instruction online. And then came the governor's stay at home order on March 19th. So we felt good that we were kind of one of the first community colleges to do that. And the board did an emergency declaration on March 23rd. And we quickly deployed a virtual board meeting. And I found out later that as we had our board meeting, others were still trying to figure out how to have board meetings online with the Open Meetings Act and things like that. So we were again ahead of the curve there. We canceled athletics, scheduled events, and once you cancel events, occasionally you have to do refunds. So we had that kind of processing to go. And basically, communication was a big part of the second and third week of March. People want to know all kinds of things. And so we had to respond to all of those concerns. And I personally responded to over a couple of hundred student emails seeking guidance on various matters, to demanding certain things. And but it was all in good taste, and we got through it. As we talked about implementing online remote instruction, we had a challenge in that classes that require hands-on or face-to-face interaction, they're very difficult to move online. But our faculty did innovate and adapt. And I'm really thankful as to how innovative they became to basically move significant number of our lab courses also online. Then it became a statewide matter. And once it became a statewide matter, we could ask for exemptions from various ed code requirements that we have to abide by. So taking courses online, attendance, something called positive attendance, all of those things are governed by state code. So we had to work with the California Chancellor's Office to get those exemptions. Our Faculty Resource Center rolled out an extensive array of training, and that coincided with spring break, so that helped. So we had 1 week to get all our faculty up to speed on online instruction. We found out that students will be needing computers, so we had to repurpose over 750 Chromebooks from the classrooms, and then develop a distribution protocol for the Chromebooks. HR deployed extensive library of training materials and professional development materials. And one of the things we focused on is that if people didn't have enough to do, then they should be documenting desk procedures. So we hope that in a 4 to 6 months time, we'll have a good binder of desk procedures of our processes. And then unfortunately, we had to also cancel our commencement. So we are going to have a virtual commencement ceremony on May 8th. Now I'd like to share some results with you. If you go to the next slide. So here's what we were able to accomplish. We were able to move 95% of our credit classes to remote instruction. And for a number, that's over 1,200 classes. Extended education, which typically did not do things on an online format at all, they were able to move over 200 courses to a video conferencing format. And then we found out that a lot of older adults liked it. And actually they enrollment increased in number of courses because older adults find it more convenient. We were able to pilot and then implement a live video instruction in the county jail. All our operations went online, I would say without a hitch. Students have access to virtual desktop interface. So all the courseware that they have in labs are available for students. And here's an interesting statistic for you. In the month of April, we did 8,885 Zoom meetings. That's about more than 300 meetings a day. So our capacity was really tested, and we haven't had much complaints about Zoom not working or not being able to conduct those meetings. So things are still happening in the remote area. Going to the next slide. So here is a part that we are most proud of and thankful about, is that we immediately realized that there will be a number of students who will not be able to take advantage of remote instruction because of their circumstances. So as I mentioned, we deployed distribution of Chromebooks. So we have over 600 Chromebooks that were distributed to students. You can be attending classes without tutoring and counseling. So online tutoring and counseling is going full swing. A significant number of students don't have access to good Wi-Fi. So we deployed Wi-Fi in a number of our parking lots. And our data shows that on the average about 180 students, which means 180 cars are parked because they cannot come out of the cars, are parked, and they regularly use them late till at night to access internet. We had a food pantry that we had to close, but we didn't want to disadvantage students. So we have a food distribution that goes on every Wednesday, and on the average, 300 bags are distributed. And I volunteered to work on a couple of those food distributions. And I can tell you, we were going to distribute, I think at 2 o'clock or 2:30, and we saw cars lining up at 1:30. So there is a tremendous need for food items. And then, of course, the economy hit, and we need to provide emergency grant to students. And here it is. I have to say thank you to the foundation, because we may not all of you may know it, but we rolled out an emergency grant program where students are given up to $1,000 for emergency needs. On the very first 2 days, we got 1,200 applications, ultimately more than 2,000. I think Jeff has the data, but roughly the average award was somewhere around $800, $850. That's over close to $2 million that the foundation was able to provide to our students for getting through the first phase of the emergency. And I can tell you that no other community college in the nation has been able to do that. And we did it in a span of from concept to implementation a week. And we promised that we were going to give them their award checks in 3 days. And I think Jeff will tell you that we were able to do that in 3 days to process the paperwork and give students the money. So thank you again, foundation, and the donors to the foundation who your past donations basically made it possible. So thank you. Now looking forward to the future, we are expecting a fairly difficult year ahead, budget-wise, enrollment-wise, all kinds of disruptions that we anticipate. Of course, that there is a terrible economy. But we have made some decisions. Summer is going to be online. Fall, there is still uncertainty regarding what is going to happen in fall. We are starting with the presumption that we will start face-to-face, but we may have to go online at any time. We just received funding from the federal government, about $2.7, $2.8 million for the CARES Act. So these are, again, we'll follow up on the grants that the foundation gave. So we will, we have started processing those applications for the federal grants. And as of now, I think about 1,500 plus students have already applied to receive those grants. And then we are planning for campus operations very soon, whenever the governor lifts the stay-at-home order. So we have to, procure sneeze guards and sanitizing stations, signage and gloves and masks. And so our folks have been pretty busy planning as to where we need to do what. And also to the fact that we may have to still have some employees working remotely because they're at the at-risk category. So, so a lot of moving parts that our people have stepped up to navigate through. And that makes me very proud that we didn't have to wait. People did not wait for somebody to issue an order. They just took what is in front of them and ran with it. And I'm delighted at the professionalism of our employees. With that report, I'm willing to answer a few questions. So you feel free to share some thoughts as to what we might be doing in the future or how we might do things better. Thank you. You're muted. Jeff, you're muted.
There we go. Yeah, I'm not allowed to unmute myself either, just so we're equitable here. So thank you so much, Dr. Goswami. I want to first say that I know a lot of folks have watched this from the outside, and we have a mix of people on the call today, people that have been part of this pivot, as well as folks that probably just saw it from a distance. And I will say that as someone who had a fairly close-up view, it's been really impressive how many simultaneous changes have had to be made and how, frankly, gracefully they've been made despite the difficulty. So I know always bumps in the road, and there certainly are things to work out, but I just want to share that the perspective of a huge section of this community is that it's been amazing to watch. And of course, this wave of innovation that we're all part of, whether we want to be or not, certainly has some long-lasting benefits, very likely. You mentioned at the end of your remarks there, and I'll just remind folks that if you'd like to ask questions, please use the chat box. I'm going to pose a few questions to Dr. Goswami, and we're happy to include anything that folks would like to hear who are participants today. But on the enrollment question, and this of course is always a perennial question for a community college, it seems that we have two countervailing forces. One is the challenge of enrollment with this rapid pivot to remote learning, which has been, although welcome for many, certainly a challenge for some. And then we have the economic situation that historically at least would suggest a massive increase in enrollment. How are you thinking about that? And maybe could you share a bit about what conversations are happening among college presidents or with the Chancellor's office about how to be ready for whatever comes next? So
there's a very interesting dynamic regarding the economy and enrollment, which is, of course, the economy goes down, a lot of students come back to colleges to get retrained. And when the economy goes down, the state has the least amount of money. And when the economy goes down, the colleges need the most amount of money because we need to have more courses, more programs. So it's a unfortunate mingling of circumstances in a sense that we need more resources when the state has least amount of resources. And that typically boils down to limitations on enrollment. So when in the past in California, what has happened is a lot of times you basically end up in a capped situation where now we can admit only so many students and no more. So one of the things we are pushing forward in terms of advocacy is provisions for growth funding next year. Because without growth funding, Santa Barbara City College can admit somewhere around 200 to 400 more full-time equivalent students. That's a reality. We can admit a whole lot more non-resident students and international students because they don't get funded by the state, and they pay much more. But we are going to lose. We are planning on losing at least half our international students next year, and half our out-of-state students next year, and there is no way to make up that loss by increasing our resident students because we barely have 200 to 400 additional capacity unless the state allows us growth funding. So we're in a kind of a dilemma here. We know the need is going to be great. The question is, how do we meet them?
Can you comment on the student enrollment for this semester? I know when this hit and you were mentioning that specific challenge of getting through that 80% of the semester. For students that were enrolled, is it too early to know whether we retained most of that enrollment for the spring semester? I know all of us have been talking about that in the college and the foundation of how to support students to stay enrolled during all of these challenges that come their way. And of course, that was the emergency grants and on the Chromebooks and all the offerings from the college and the foundation. Do we have any sense yet of how successful we've been of supporting students to remain enrolled through this spring?
We don't have accurate data, and there is no reliable way of getting that data. We have anecdotal reports. Some say that all our students are present, and some faculty will say, well, I have lost most of my students. So we will know only after we go through a grading process, because at that point in time, we can tally up how many people got graded and how many people were in the rolls. I think we'll have to wait a couple more weeks to get a better idea of how many students we have lost. But I'm pretty sure we'll have lost some students. But again, the interesting thing is that they may not be attending classes in the sense of signing on to their Canvas shell, but they may still take the final. So you never know, where we are, but we do anticipate that there will be some drop-offs. And that's why my intent is to make sure that we have some online, physical presence on campus in the fall, because our student population is such that if you leave them away from campus for a long period of time, the tendency to kind of disappear and do nothing, or because to be an online student, you have to be extremely disciplined and self-motivated. And we know that even we are not that self-motivated and disciplined. So I worry about that.
You mentioned on your presentation when we discussed sort of the enrollment and the pivot for students, many folks know that community colleges serve students as they come out of high school and move into their higher ed career. But they don't always have top of mind the fact that, we have this robust, adult education program now, the School of Extended Learning. But we also have some really interesting community partnerships. And you had a reference there to our partnerships with our incarcerated students. Can you talk a little bit about sort of what kind of challenges you face and maybe some of the lesser known but really creative solutions that had to be quickly created to pivot in this way? Because it's not just the students attending a traditional classroom.
Yeah, I think, if the students ultimately perform on the basis of what their end goals are, whether they're kind of transient with us for whatever it is, for a few courses, they'll behave and act in one way, versus if they have a particular goal of attaining a degree or a certificate, then they're going to behave in another way. So I anticipate that our mix of students in terms of what their goals might be might change significantly. And that will impact classroom management. And what kind of questions, how they participate in the classroom, what kind of questions they ask in the classroom. So it will be kind of challenging on the part of the instructors, because they'll have to switch their mindset, and how they end up teaching their class, because their student population has changed. So we may end up with this, with our same number of students, let's say, in the ideal best case scenario, but the composition of student goals might change, and that will change the dynamics of the classroom. Thank you.
I want to blow this up really big for a moment and talk very high level. The California Community College system is, as I think most folks on the call may know, the largest higher ed system in the world. Certainly, it's the quarter of all community college students in the nation are part of our state's community college system. And in addition to an education system, as we referenced a number of times in this conversation, it's a work training program, it's an economic development program, and in fact, the Chancellor's Office very regularly puts out the statistic that for every dollar that California invests in our system, that $4.50 is generated economically, just because we're such an efficient work training development program, and really set of hundreds of programs, thousands of programs. How does that figure into the conversations right now at a statewide level, maybe with the legislature, with the Chancellor's Office, as we try to position the colleges as critical recovery tools, really? Because it's not just about saving the colleges for the educational sake of our missions. It's the fact that we actually do all these things that now the state and the nation are dependent on as we try for this unprecedented economic recovery. Is that part of the conversation as far as how that figures into the prioritization of our community college system?
It is always a part of the conversation. It has always been part of the conversation, but has it been part of the funding? And the answer is no. The funding was not part of that conversation. So the workforce development funding in California is unfortunately somewhat behind compared to many other states. So our School of Extended Learning recently rolled out, training programs for newly unemployed people to upskill and get to a new job. So most of them will be run on a cost recovery basis. In many states, we can run those programs because the state funds them. In many states, the states give money to corporations or businesses to send their employees to us, and it's called third-party care. So we build the company, and company builds the state, and state gives the money to the, because they retain this employee for 6 months, or 8 years, so on and so forth. So for workforce development, I think a significant amount of work still needs to be done in terms of training, providing training for displaced workers. Yeah, it has always been part of the conversation, but funding has not followed. So it has always been on our dime or institutional dime that it happens. And the way the institutional dime happens, since we get a fixed pot, if you put more money this side, then you'll have less money on the other side. It's a zero-sum game. I mean, that's the reality of my world. That if I put more money here, then I'm going to put less money someplace else.
So
We don't get to keep our tuition also, because all our tuition dollars goes back to the state also.
I'm going to use that as an invitation to say maybe this is a really good time to suggest to our guests that it's a great investment to support your community college through its Community College Foundation.
Absolutely.
I'll just leave that right there.
Yep. A few dollars will let me do a wonderful amount of things.
Absolutely. And it's an efficient machine in every way. Absolutely. And actually, there's another statistic I just want to share, and it's really not a question with this, but in this moment when we're so focused on our frontline healthcare workers and nurses, another statistic that the college, the Chancellor's Office, just the other day on a webinar, once again put out front and center, was that 70% of our nurses in California were actually trained through our community colleges. So it's workforce development, but it's also critical infrastructure, and that number is even higher if you count all first responders. So clearly a good time to make that argument, it seems.
Mm-hmm.
So as another question really to you about what you've learned through all of this, I mean, you stepped into this, as you said, with nobody expected this. There was no one that was sort of getting ready in the micro sense, other than the knowledge maybe that we knew that pandemics are a reality and a historical reality. But when it comes to the nitty gritty of running a college, what are some things that you learned or maybe even surprised you as you prepared with your team to make this change of how the college operates for the moment?
I think we got a very good sense of the digital divide. We always knew there was a digital divide, but we never could understand how big. We could only guess as to what the digital divide was going to be. So now we have a very good understanding of the digital divide. And now that we have done things remotely in a way, I think what we have learned is even in the traditional classrooms, we can integrate many components of remote learning. So recording yourself in a video and kind of now giving some instruction to students or giving a tutorial to students, will become somewhat more commonplace. In the past, only people who taught online used to do it. Now other faculty might decide to do the same thing, because now you can supplement a lot of things and do in the classroom by recording yourself in short clips. I think the model of maintaining a whole bunch of computer labs will probably go away, and we probably will end up issuing or requiring all students to have a laptop or a Chromebook or something, so that so we can kind of make the transition to to bring your own device kind of a environment. And I think we have learned something about how to do things quickly and effectively, because traditional model of higher education is that now you think about something this year, plan for it next year, and maybe you'll do something the year after. All right, but I think we have gone from thinking to planning to doing it in a few months. So I think some of the things in terms of how we can bring things to fruition, we might be able to speed up. So we understood a lot of our latent capabilities that we didn't know before. And I think people were stretched, and they found out that they could stretch themselves and actually do well. So that's reaffirming to many people.
Certainly. Well, we've got 100 folks on this call who are invested in all manner of ways in the success of the college, and this, of course, being here for 110 years, we know that the college has served generations of people here and abroad. What are some ways, and this is a question coming from one of our attendees. I want to shout out to Meryl Brown, who's on with us. But what are some ways that the community of supporters around you right now can do? What can they do to help? what kinds of support would you seek from your broader community at a time like this?
I think, all fronts, but to name a few, clearly ability to provide internships, externships to our students is very important. Not all have to be paid. We'll certainly like them to be paid, but if it is unpaid, that's fine too. But I think being able to translate what you do in the classroom to something out in the workforce is very, very important. A lot of times when you're dealing with the student body that we have, we need people to be role models. So mentoring is very, very important. So ability to mentor some of our students is going to be very, very important. I would like to bring members of the community to interact with students, because through that interaction, students learn a lot of things, and members of the community also learn a lot of things. So we will try to create opportunities for members of the community to come to our campus and interact with students. And of course, if they can help financially, that's even better, because as I indicated in my meeting with some of the foundation board members, is that our funding level is to be average. To expect excellence out of average funding is kind of really difficult. And so the margin of excellence is basically the dollars that we get from philanthropy to do things in a flexible way. That will be very, very important. And long term, I think, this institution is the community's institution. Last major infrastructure overhaul took place 30 to 40 years back. And so we need to overhaul our infrastructure in the next 4 or 5 years, because if you don't do that, then things will go so far, things will fall so far behind that we might as well have to condemn some of the buildings, because so we are, so you don't want to, buildings give a sense of, what value you place on students. Just like when you invite people to your home, you put out your best china and table and everything else. Similarly, when we invite students to our campus, we want to invite them to a campus that is first world. And we are struggling really hard to stay there. And so, at some point in time, I think we'll have to ask the community to help us, revamp some of our infrastructure. The unfortunate part is we look good from the outside, but if you go inside to some of the nuts and bolts of the buildings, things are not that great.
All right, so to summarize, we're looking at internships, ways to connect in the community, opportunities on campus to connect community members and campus folks, dollars and cents certainly, so financial support, and ultimately down the line, some bigger infrastructure that needs to be rebuilt at the campus. So I appreciate that. As we start to wrap up here, we've got a few folks asking for sort of what's in front of us right now. We're of course coming to that moment that so many students look forward to, of commencement, and of course we're going to have it in a new way this year. Can you comment on two things? One is, what does commencement look like in a remote environment? Anything you can share? And two, what is summer session looking like? We do have our 2 summer sessions. Are we seeing enrollment spiking, dropping, holding steady? Do we know yet?
Summer enrollment is actually a little bit up, 5 to 8% up. A few more days to go before we can finally, say, well, this is where we are. But so far we are a little bit up, and that's because people who could be doing something someplace else, they cannot be doing someplace else, so they're all here, And then in terms of commencement, what will happen is that we will go through the formal part of the ceremony where, I welcome the community and the students, and then the chief instructional officer, certifies the students, and then there's the award of degrees and things like that sort. But the actual commencement, walking across the stage, is going to be, we will have the picture of the student and a quote from the student. So graduation would be, commencement will be walking down the street. Their name will kind of will flash up on the screen, and then and then of course it will be accompanied by the music and all that stuff. So not the same as the showing up in the field and the energy from the crowd, but hopefully people will get together with their parents and well-wishers and have a party at their house and watch the graduates go by on the screen.
Excellent. Well, we all look forward to participating in a new way, and I know we'll have many people on this call trying to find a way to connect during that very special moment. So thank you for that. We have just a couple more questions, and I want to make sure I give you the last word as we close out. And one more very specific thing. You mentioned earlier that one of the things the college did very well was put technology in the hands of students. You mentioned the digital divide that you discovered. And of course, as you look at summer enrollment looking really good, in fact, relatively high, all those Chromebooks that the college checked out, what are the plans? Are students going to be able to hang on to those and check them out for the next session, or bring them back?
Yes.
Or what are we thinking?
So students who are enrolled for summer, it's like we have issued the library book and then we renew the book again for summer. So we gave them the Chromebook for spring, and then if they're enrolled for the summer, they get to keep it for the summer. And people who are not enrolled in the summer, then they'll return it, and then if they become students at some point in time, and we are still in remote instruction, we'll issue them back to the students.
Great. Well, thank you. So as promised, I want to thank you on behalf of the foundation and all the community that supports us, and of course all the donors and leadership that came before that have made our work possible. Wanted to give you the last word. Anything you'd like to share or thoughts you'd like to leave with our audience before we sign off today?
Well, I heard over 100 people are attending this webinar, so obviously the community interest is very high. I thank you. I've been talking to my wife that we have been here 4 months and we barely know anybody, because by the time we got to know somebody, we had to stay home. So my plan is to go out and in gusto when the stay at home order is removed, and attend and invite lots of parties and meet people. So I would like to look for the opportunity to force myself into the community in a sense now. So if there is interest among the members of the community to invite me to participate in something, please feel free to do so, because I'll be happy to do it.
Great. So we'll have more parties with face masks, I guess, is what we're gonna look for.
Right. But we'll remove it to have a drink or eat.
That's right. Fair enough. Yeah. We're all figuring out how to do that in our home lives as well, I know. Well, thank you so much. I want to again thank Dr. Utpal Goswami, our Superintendent President for Santa Barbara City College. I'm Jeff Green, your CEO for the SBCC Foundation. I want to thank the 100+ people, and I really do apologize that we ran out of room on our very first call, but we will correct that for next time. We are making this a series. Valerie Ellis, a few other folks had inquired about that on the chat box. Yes, we will continue to do this. We will put out a schedule of future conversations, and we really are grateful for everyone's interest and support for our community's college. So thank you very much, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you, Jeff, and thank you, everybody.